depression, anxiety and depression. So what is anxiety and depression? So the first thing that I thought about when I was thinking about this session is that when we experience anxiety and depression for a period, we kind of often ask ourselves, what's going on here? What's wrong with me? I can't sort this out. You know, am I going to be like this for the rest of my life? Why am I not normal, etc., etc.? And depression tends to drain one's energy and drive, which makes it difficult to recover from the condition. Um, so the key really is to start small, and build from where you've started. And I'm going to be telling you a story of this young man who recovered from the really deep depression over a long period of time, and how he has had to start small and how he progressed. And in the end, he was able to write an article about how he recovered from anxiety and depression. And that article was of such meaning to a lot of people. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, what is anxiety? Because in order to really understand it and to be able to work with it, because we all, I'm sure in this time, we experience, you know, either mild, low grade, or deep depression or anxiety at some point in our lives. And it's important for us to be able to know what it is that we're dealing with in order to be able to manage it without having to be medicated and lose your sense of self. So I think the best thing for us to do is really just to talk about what anxiety is briefly. So it all starts with thoughts, as I'm sure you will imagine. It's compulsive thinking that becomes an obsession. And it's obviously very upsetting for everyone. It's difficult to eliminate. And if it's not addressed in the appropriate way, it can lead to obsessive compulsory disorder, OCD. I'm sure you've heard, you know, that the term OCD being branded around from time to time. So the thought is compulsive and the behavior is the disorder, which is the OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So anxiety is not the same as being afraid. It's not the same as fear, which is more realistically about a real response to threat. So we see the car driving fast up the road from you know, down towards me as I'm crossing the road. And I know realistically that if I don't move fast, I will get hit by that car. So that's what I mean by it's not the same, anxiety not being the same as fear. Fear is, you know, you can see that the car coming, you know, fear is triggered and it tells you move and you have to move. Anxiety is subjectively perceived, which means it's dread over something you think will happen. And there is no real danger really. Why? Because the mind is out of control. So it's like the mind is ruling, the mind is in control, the mind is running the body, the mind is, you know, has taken precedence over your body. So what is depression? So what is depression? It's more than simply feeling unhappy or fed up. you know, on a day or sometime during the course of the day, one may have a low mood and they may feel as if, you know, it will last, but then it normally goes. So that's not really depression. Depression really lasts for longer. Sometimes it stretches into months, weeks and months, and stretches into years, coupled with, and when it stretches into months and years, then you begin to experience the psychological and the physiological symptoms of, of that, being in that negative state of mind for such a long period of time. So when we experience episodes of depression, our whole life is affected. Yes, relationships. And we also find daily tasks, you know, simple daily tasks as overwhelming, which is something the young man talked about in his story about having to manage depression, anxiety and depression. Our thoughts affect our feelings and our emotions. So it's about how we react and how or behave, thoughts and feelings, emotions, how we react and how we behave. We can then develop a negative mindset, which causes emotional overload that leads to low mood, anxiety, and depression. So it starts with the thoughts, really. So in terms of the types of anxiety disorder, so let's look at the type of anxiety disorders that one's likely to develop if they don't do much about it at the early stages. So compulsive thinking is negative. Negative thinking, of course, it's a subtle form of repressed anger. So that those thoughts which tend to just keep going around in your mind. And, you know, one cannot see the manifestation of those thoughts in behavior at that point. They're repressed and suppressed. And actually, if someone is within your orbit who is very highly emotionally intelligent, they will notice that something is going on. However, those subtle forms of repressed and suppressed anger, they block the soul's expression. They block the soul's expression because obviously it's negative thinking that's churning in the back of my mind. It's very important to say that anxiety, you know, compulsive thinking doesn't come as a result of, it's not a condition. It's not a disease or an illness. It's not a disease or an illness. It's a condition. So you have things like panic disorder. It's an illness. It's not a disease, actually. Yeah, it's not a disease. It's an illness. So you have things like panic disorder. You have post-traumatic stress disorder. You have social phobias. These are all these different names that have been given. You have the GAD. GAD is generalized anxiety disorder, and there is agoraphobia, which this young man talks about. So let me just quickly go over this bit again, because it feels intuitively that I need to. So the types of disorders, that's what I'm actually talking about. So, and I say compulsive thinking is as a result of those subtle forms of suppressed and repressed anger that are churning around inside, and that blocks the soul's expression. Anxiety is a symptom of a condition. Anxiety is a symptom of a condition. It's not a disease. But it's an illness. It's an illness. So those lists of things that I mentioned earlier, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, social phobia, etc., those are the list of things that they have come up with. So compulsive thinking leads to obsessive behavior, which is what I've just tried to explain earlier on. So, and it's also about how thoughts influence behavior in anxiety situations. It's about how the thoughts influence behavior. So, for example, the compulsive thought could be, I'm feeling unsafe when I am outside. I'm not feeling safe. I come across someone recently, young person, who said, I love the outdoors. I'm a sports fanatic. I am a tour guide. And he said, all of a sudden, I can't do those things. I can't leave the house. And I don't know what to do. I'm really so unhappy because it means I can't work. Not to mention the COVID, but even that, you know, the fact that he cannot leave his house was a big deal. So if I have a thought, I'm feeling unsafe when I'm outside, then the behavior, the obsessive behavior that would result from that is a need to self-isolate, to be indoors all the time. And indeed, this is what happened to that young man I mentioned earlier. The other thought could be, I'm running a temperature. So there are people who have these compulsive thoughts. I'm running a temperature, I've got a fever, I'm not well, I'm not well. And somebody who thinks, you know, have a compulsive thought, I'm running a temperature, they'll always be checking their pulse to see whether or not they have a temperature every 10 minutes or so. The other thought could be, my child isn't safe. My child isn't safe. And what you'll find there in terms of the obsessive behavior is the parent being really overprotective towards the child, who could then feel smothered. So the thought which is repetitive, is compulsive. And what that means, when that thought is building and building and building and building, it eventually gets to a point where it becomes a pattern. At the point when it's compulsive and it's repetitive, I'm aware that I'm thinking those thoughts. However, when it gets really ingrained and it becomes a pattern, it means that I'm not conscious of the thought anymore. It's like an underground stream trickling away and really creating havoc in my personality and in my relationships with people, situations, and, you know, things, for example, in anxiety and depression situation. So the compulsive repetitive thought, which is conscious, becomes a thought pattern which is unconscious. And as it builds, and in fact, when it's unconscious, it builds more, because I'm thinking those thoughts without realizing, you know, it's really kind of developed a life of its own, basically. So I don't have to be conscious that I'm thinking the thoughts. As a matter of fact, I don't have to be thinking the thoughts in order for, you know, that pattern, which is etched there somewhere in my subconscious mind, to work. And then the next stage is when it becomes a thought form. I'm sure each of you must have come across the words thought form. A thought form is, for example, the chair, or, you know, the table. Thought is energy, and nothing material, nothing physical exists without the first being a thought. So energy, which is the thought, creates matter. So I don't have to be conscious for the thought to be active. It's developed a life of its own. And this is a really frightening thing, actually, that it's developed a life of its own. Once I get past that compulsive thinking stage where it's repetitive, and I can actually relatively easily do something about it. So what I want to do, I want to try and see if I can show you a slide, and I'm sure it's going to work. And the slide is about how the cyclical, which is basically what I've just explained, of the cyclical pattern of thoughts and behavior is reinforced. Okay, so let's go for it and see if we can find it, this slide. Can you see it? Can you all see it? Fantastic. So this is basically what I've been talking about. So the thought, we have the thought, and we're conscious that we have the thought, I am a failure, or I'm worthless. It's my fault. Life isn't worth living. Okay. And then obviously, immediately I have a thought. The feelings and the emotions follow suit, isn't it? So the feelings and the emotions will be of being overwhelmed, irritable, guilty, frustrated, indecisive, unhappy, disappointed, sad, miserable, fear, etc. Okay, so thoughts influence feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotions influence behavior. Behavior becomes really, this is when the cells and the molecules and the atoms in the body become so affected. Okay, so let's just go back here. So the feelings and emotions influence the behavior. So with the behavior is one, the person is withdrawn, unable to concentrate, stop doing whatever, doing enjoyable activities, not meeting deadlines, for example, if they're at work or at school, relying on alcohol and sedatives. So that's the behavior, okay? Now, when I say physical here, I'm talking about how the cells, the molecules, and the atoms in the body become affected through the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, behaviors that's going on for me. Tired all the time, ill and run down, headaches, muscle pain, insomnia, loss of appetite, and so on and so forth. So this is just basically to show you, because sometimes when I explain, I'm a visual person, that's how I learn. And so I just feel it's good to show slides at times when I explain something. I hope that makes sense for you. Okay. Okay. So I just want to say that, having shown that, so the compulsive the behavior means, it means the behavior is obsessive, and it's involuntary. It's involuntary. It gets to a point where it's involuntary because that underground stream is there trickling away, and it's like there's nothing that you can do to put it right. It's gone too far. But obviously, in terms of healing the soul, it's not too far. It's never too late. But it's just that on one hand, you do less work to get back to your original state, and on another hand, you do more work. Okay, so the compulsive, so the compulsive behavior is obsessive, and it's involuntary. So I'm aware of the thought when it's repetitive, but as repetition builds, it becomes a thought pattern and compulsive in nature. I'm no longer aware that it's creating my reality, which is basically what I've just explained. So to stop the behavior, what do I need to do in order to stop the behavior? I need to go back to the level of belief. Why do we need to go back to the level of belief? I've just said that the thought influences the feelings, emotions influence the behavior, etc. But there is the components of consciousness, which begins with belief. So every thought I think comes from a belief. Every thought I think comes from a belief. Or even those repetitive thoughts which then become unconscious, they come from a belief. So it's about having to go back to the level of belief and the thought and create new positive ones that will override the old. But then, even then, it doesn't stop there. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna show you a mind-body connection slide. Let's see. Okay, this one. So mind-body connection. So this is what I've just explained. Repetitive thoughts are conscious. It's energy. It's energy. It then becomes a thought pattern. It's conscious, unconscious. It's conscious here, it's unconscious there. It's this energy here becomes an energetic imprint. Becomes an energetic imprint. At this stage, when it becomes the chair or the table, it affects physical matter. My body is impacted by what is going on in my thoughts and feelings. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to stop there and just go back. Okay. So okay. So identity. So I'm now going to talk about identity because I've just talked about how we become, how anxiety and depression have become deep-seated in my personality, in my consciousness. And now I'm going to quickly talk about how to address it. Okay? So whatever it is we think, whatever it is we say, whatever it is we do, really has a lot to do with identity and self-image. Who I think I am will determine how I see myself. How I see myself will determine how I relate to myself. How I relate to myself will determine how I relate to others and the outside world. So everything obviously starts from the self. Everything starts from the self. And as I said earlier on, belief is the seed of thought. Belief is the seed of values, for example, those things that I hold dear. Belief is the seed of values. Belief is the seed of perception, how I see, how I feel, what I hear, those sorts of things. Belief is the seed of attitude. Belief is a seed of words. Belief is a seed of action. So when I am thinking compulsively, there is something that I'm believing about myself that I'm not necessarily aware of. I'm thinking about that identity, which is based on the physical. I'm not thinking about the identity that's based on the non-spiritual, which is only the core of which is only goodness. So basically what's happening there is that that identity has replaced the truth of who I really am. And somehow I get to be in that place of fearing losing my outer identity. I'm not aware that I have an inner identity. I'm seeing my outer identity as my identity per se. So it's fear of losing my outer identity, because that's what it is, which is really, in a sense, false evidence appearing real, because it's not the real me. It's that false evidence that is there in the form of, you know, whatever it is, discomfort that I'm feeling in the mind and in the body, that's really taking over my mind. And obviously, what's happening is that I'm attached to that identity because I fear losing it. So attachment really is a huge problem in this regard. I'm just going to show you another slide. Another slide. Okay, fine. Okay. Here we are. Okay, so, okay, here we are. So here's another slide. This slide really just explains how I become attached to an identity about myself that is not real, that's causing me to become anxious and distressed. So the behavior, so attachment, identity is an identity issue. And so I'm explaining that. So the behavior is the emotion, which is the anxiety that I'm expressing. The cause of the behavior is the compulsive thinking. Actually, if you want me to send you the handouts, I will, because I made these, I selected these handouts specifically to make them available to participants who are interested in having them. So I don't mind. Okay, so as I said, the behavior being the emotion, you can see the anxiety in the person's behavior. That's the emotion. The cause of the behavior is the compulsive thinking. Okay, I'm attached to what am I attached to? I'm attached to the need to think in order to feel. I'm attached to the need to think in order to feel safe, okay? And the compulsive, and the result, which is a disorder, is either the OCD, the GAD, or the panic disorder. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do now, I just want to quickly just show you another slide. I want to show you quickly another slide, and then we'll move on to talking about this young man's story. Okay, so the impact of awareness is either I'm being ruled by the mind, or the mind is ruling me. So this chart here shows you when I'm out of alignment, which is when my identity is based on my false self in the context of anxiety and disorder, and when I am in alignment with my true, pure, eternal, values-based self. Okay, so here the top row is clearly showing that this person is being ruled by the mind. Awareness. They don't understand that they're a soul. So they're unaligned. They're really steeped in their extrinsic values, all those external props that they use to make them feel good about themselves. So the thought will be, I'm just a body, I'm in danger. For example, it could be that you're on a train or a bus, you're going somewhere, and someone starts to freak out on the bus, and people start to rush off the bus. And there are some people who will step on top of another person in order to get off the bus, okay? So the thought that they are likely to have is, I'm just a body, I'm in danger. The feeling that they might have is fear, or definitely fear. And I've got here depression, just in order to demonstrate what I'm talking about. The emotions that they will have will be panic, anger, rage, and anxiety. The action that they will be doing will be either rushing to get off the bus, risking other people's lives because they're pushing so fast, they're in such a rage to get off the bus, or they fly. But also some people freeze in that situation. Some people freeze out of fear. Whereas if you look at the other column, the column below, the person here who is aligned with their intrinsic values, they understand that they're a soul. Their thought will be, I'm energy, I can't be destroyed. There was a story about this man who was a practicing yogi, Brahma Kumari. He was caught in the 9/11 catastrophe in New York, Manhattan. And he was going down the stairs, and people were just, scrambling down the stairs. People were in such panic. And he got down, and whereas some people who were going down with him didn't get there safely because they were in such a rage, they was in such a panic. The feeling that person might have will be, they feel calm, they feel secure, they feel peaceful, even though physically whatever is going on around them is quite different. The emotions will be, the soul doesn't express emotions. The soul doesn't express emotions. So here you can see in the top row, you can see the person's expressing panic, rage, anger, anxiety. But in that state, the person, the converse to that, the person they don't express any emotions, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're emotionless. They're basically peaceful, they're focused. Emotions are not a bad thing, because really they're here for humans to express themselves, but in that state of soul consciousness, we don't express emotions. Okay, so I want to just quickly move on because I can't remember what time you said I needed to stop to talk, but I just wanted to talk about that young man before we finish. Usha, can you remind me what time I'm supposed to stop talking? Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Can't hear you, Usha. I still can't hear you.
6 o'clock or 6:05 is fine.
Oh, fantastic. Lovely. So that
Yeah.
means I've got time. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So this young man, this is a beautiful story, actually. I'm really looking forward to telling you about him. So this young man, and it really picks up on the things I've talked about earlier on. So having just looked at the impact of either being ruled by the mind or being in control of the mind, one, I'm in alignment with my awareness of my true eternal self, and on the other hand, I'm not in alignment. Therefore, there's a lot of fear in me. There is this feeling of having to do something always in order to protect myself, even if it actually threatens threatens someone's ability to be able to cope. So, healing anxiety without medication. This is what I've actually thinking this young man did. So, he was a normal, nice guy, he said in this article. He said, I was a normal, nice guy, had a beautiful apartment, had a beautiful partner. I had no financial problems at all. And there was no stress of work at work. And he says, I was a king of the world. That's how he started his story. And then he said, one morning as he was going to work, he started feeling a bit strange. It's interesting, isn't it? How these things creep up on you. He said he started feeling strange. And he decided that he would just ride out the day. But things never really got back to how he was feeling initially. Things just progressively got worse. And despite over the several weeks where he was gradually becoming less able to cope at work and to cope with the outside world, he had been making numerous visits to his GP, and they were carrying out a number of tests, to find out what was wrong with him. And he was diagnosed as having had generalized anxiety disorder. And they prescribed him some medications, but he decided that he wasn't going to take the medication that he was prescribed because he just felt that, they were wrong. He said things got really worse, and then depression actually set in, and he began to have suicidal thoughts. And it was round about the same time that he lost his job. And when he lost his job, he said that he wasn't even able to he wasn't able to go outside. He used to love going to the supermarkets with his partner. And he said that that's one of the chores that he would look forward to doing with her on a weekend when they were both off work. But he just kind of grinded to a halt, basically. He couldn't do anything. He said he didn't believe the diagnosis and that the illness was in his mind, but thought he had a terminal disease and that he would soon die. A few months after the first panic attack, he started having panic attacks. And he said he was just completely hopeless. He couldn't do anything. And as I said, he became housebound and he wasn't eating properly and his sleeping was affected quite significantly. And he said he hit rock bottom and had been at rock bottom for a significant amount of time. And one day, this is a trigger, this is very, very important. He said one day he came across his mom's pendant. His mom had passed some time before. He came across his mom's pendant with photos in the pendants of loved ones that had passed. And he was just reflecting on the pictures in the pendant. And I don't know, this thought just came out of the blue. He said he decided not to be one of those photos in the pendant, and found the motivation to shift his mindset. So something triggered his thought that, you know, if he continued doing what he was doing, he was in fact going to die because he had made that decision. That's what was going to happen. And then he said he thought, well, I thought myself into this mess, and now I can think myself out of it. And then he said, I began to use my intellect to have positive, this is amazing. He said he began to use his intellect to have positive inner conversations about his health issues. And he used to have thoughts such as, if I did have a terminal illness, I didn't want to live my last years living in fear and depression. And then he says, and I'm not in control of that. So then he says, well, so let me think about the things I can control. So what are the things that he can control? He can control the behavior, and he can control the negative thinking, thought patterns that he has. He used to do a lot of Googling as one of the symptoms of his compulsive behavior. He used to be on the internet a lot, and he would be Googling this and Googling that about his symptoms, checking his pulse, instead of focusing on, you know, something else. So he was doing a lot of, you know, searching the internet just to check that he doesn't or does have those disorders that his doctors have talked about. And he said he got to a point as he was having these inner conversations with himself. He says, I was no longer afraid of terminal illness. And then he said that if there was a major health problem, I would rather die than be living to die. He said, if there was, let me just say this sentence again because I think I've forgotten it. He says, I would rather die living than living to die. So he'd rather live his life, and if he has to die, he will die, and than to be living, just waiting for death to come. And then he talks about, in his article, he talks about the healing process, and he said, I learned that anxiety is not the outcome, but predicting and foreseeing. This is so important, everyone. He says, I learned that anxiety is not knowing the outcome, but predicting and foreseeing that bad will happen. Then he said, first, I just accepted my anxiety and panic. And this is so important because he's basically telling us what I would have actually said, you know, in part of my summing up. You know, wherever we are, even though we may be at the bottom of the ladder, flat on our backs, unless we accept that's where we are and love ourselves no matter what, we're not going to be able to begin the climb back up the ladder. Then he says, I became acutely aware of the anxious negative thoughts and not only changed them, but put them into practice, the positive thoughts into practice. And he says, and he said, this was very, very hard for me. Even in the moments when I felt okay, I could not stop thinking about anxiety. But then he says, after a while, things improved. And how did things improve? After a while, it wasn't the following day or the following week, or necessarily he got to the end in the following month. It took a while. Then he says, I stopped compulsively checking food labels, which is one of the symptoms he had, dates, ingredients of everything before he ate. And then he says, I still couldn't leave my house, but could now function in it. So his girlfriend was doing his washing, his girlfriend was doing his cooking, she was doing the shopping, she was doing everything. He was actually becoming a vegetable in the house. And he said, as things began to improve, he could see a big improvement in his anxiety symptoms. However, there was still something huge for him to tackle because he hadn't started going outside. He said no more anxiety before going to bed and waking up in the morning. So that was what he was coping with. Then he said, in terms of dealing with the agoraphobia, the journeys to the lamppost from his door was like running a marathon. He said if he did that once a day at the beginning, he felt mentally, wow, he felt mentally exhausted, and he would have fainting spells. Yeah. So, and then he talks about having had to make it to the supermarket, and that again was another big aha moment for him, because it took a very long time. If it took him ages to get to the lamppost, which was just a few yards from the door, can you imagine how long it must have taken him to get to the supermarket? He said, he talked about being outside caused the symptoms to return aggressively, whereas when he was at home, he was okay. So it became clear that his problems were all in the mind. So in addition to anxiety, he had developed a fear of the outside world. He said, I tackled my fear of the supermarket by making daily visits gradually over a period of time. And he said, I kept pushing the boundaries to the lamppost until one day he reached the supermarket. And each time he kept pushing the boundaries, the anxiety and panic symptoms would intensify. So slowly, over several weeks, he had made it to the supermarket. Didn't enjoy it, he said, but I did it. So I just quickly want to say, because I'm going to aim to stop in a couple of minutes, because I've said quite a lot and perhaps you have questions you want to ask, but trying to change the thought isn't enough if the body has become the mind through repetitive thinking on behavior. Remember what I said earlier on, that you get to a point from the repetitive thoughts to the thought patterns to the thought forms where it begins, you know, the habit has begun to impact the cells, the molecules and the atoms and the subatomic particles in the body, which means that the mind the body has become the mind. So the body, it's in the body. So when you are transforming at that level, it's quite a lot of work that one has to do. So habit is the reason why affirmation on its own doesn't work. So if I keep saying I'm a pure soul in a situation like that, if I keep saying I'm a pure soul, then that alone will not work. I have to begin to put into action the thoughts, the new thoughts that I'm trying to, you know, the new thoughts that I'm trying to build. And at the same time as I'm building the new thought, I'm erasing the old outmoded thoughts. So through the power of belief, so I'm a soul, it's not a question of saying, it's about believing that I'm a soul. Through the power of belief, we can change the physiology of our bodies by thought alone. And this is where this whole idea of the placebo effect comes in. We can change the whole physiology of thought alone. We are the pill. I am the pill. The young man was the pill. He was the placebo. It's not the pill that heals, but it's an internal capacity called belief and action that causes, you know, healing to take place. The last thing I want to say is that pure consciousness is where change happens. So when I talk about pure consciousness, what is it do I mean when I talk about pure consciousness? It's the same as saying soul consciousness is where change happens. So soul consciousness, it responds, you know, when we're in that state for a long period of time, healing can take place. And as a result of that taking place, it is because we are doing what we want. So if I want to let go of anxiety and depression, I have to do what that young man has done. He has physically taken himself into discomfort along with the positive thoughts to heal himself. So we have to be it before we can receive it. This is what we're taught in the university. So, for example, a good example is that if I believe the world is a really dangerous place to live in, I'm going to have to start acting like the world is a safe place to live in and be happy in it. So I'm gonna stop here. There are other things to talk about, but it feels as if I've said quite a lot. And I'm sorry if I went on a bit actually. So if we have some questions, let's have a conversation before we do the guided meditation.
Nina, thank you so much. You're right. There is so much to say about anxiety.
Yes.
And depression. You can go on all day.
Yes.
And still we wouldn't be able to finish. I would just like to tell everybody that if you would like to ask questions, could you, if you are able to, could you write the questions in the chat box? I will then read them out to Nina. So then there's none, you know. What is it to reach pure consciousness, especially in a troubled world?
Well, yes, it's not an easy road, but it's a very rewarding road. And it's not just a rewarding road when we get to the end. There are lots of beautiful moments that we can experience on our journey of self-transformation, even though we might be experiencing pain at whatever level. So really, it is about self-discipline. It's about the commitment, and it's about the self-discipline, and it's about loving yourself no matter what. And it's about being, in a sense, tunnel visioned, which is about being in the world but not of it. I have a health condition which becomes really amplified when I am with people a lot. I mean, I can say what it is. It's called occipital neuralgia. So I'm in pain all the time. And actually, Usha, right now, if you ask me what level of pain I am experiencing, I could say to you quite easily 6 out of 10. So I experience pain all the time. But I have learned to manage it through my spiritual practice, and with the understanding that with that it is taking me where I want to go, which is to achieve self-transformation, is to achieve happiness. Then within that, I can see the moments of achievement, feeling as if, you know, something is happening that I cannot explain and I cannot define necessarily, because of my limited vision and my limited understanding as a human being on this planet at this time. And if I were to choose to become healthy and not have pain against what I'm doing right now, I would choose what I'm doing now.
Beautiful, Nina. Thank you for sharing your thoughts as well. Nina, I have three more questions here. First one is here. Hi, I struggle dreadfully before meeting people and make myself feel exhausted and ill, worrying about it in the time leading up to it. How can I change this?
So it's a pattern that this person has had that may have started as a child. So it is very deeply ingrained in the subconscious mind of this person. And it will always come up when it comes for her to meet people, because it's a memory that is being triggered from the subconscious mind. However, it is not the real her. And whether or not she consciously works with it in order to erase it, or simply leaves it and for it to take over her life, right? And for her to feel out of control, it will have to go anyway. So she may as well be conscious and work with it. So I would say to her, when the feeling will always come up, it will come up, but self-talk is really important. It is okay. I'm not this physical body. The soul never feels ashamed or panicked or panicked or sad or whatever it is, depressed or anxious. It is the ego of the outer self that's making it's false, and it's making itself real. And she's accepting through buying into the panic and the anxiety that she's feeling. So I would say to myself, to her, whenever you feel the feeling, talk to yourself. Accept that you feel this way. However, it is okay. It is okay. I am perfect as I am right now, even though I may be shaking inside. And there's room to progress, because what she's doing is she's allowing the soul to come through so that next time it happens, she won't feel that bad. First, acceptance. Speak to yourself. Give yourself positive thoughts. That's what I'd say to her.
Beautiful, thank you. Another question. What does it mean, love yourself? How do you start loving yourself?
Oh, gosh. Yes, I mean, how do you start loving yourself when you've come from a place where you don't know yourself? How do you start to love yourself when you come from a place of not knowing yourself? It's the commitment. It's the commitment. And beginning to sit with yourself, starting off not too intensely, but maybe short periods of time, just sitting with the self, speaking to with the self, accepting the self, because a lot of the things in the way of us knowing ourselves is the fact that we are ashamed of ourselves. There's shame there. There is, we come from a home where we've not experienced love, or we've never even seen our parents expressing love. So it's not in our orbit, it's not in our repertoire. But if you had a baby, how do you care for that baby? How do you, yes, what makes you care for the baby? So begin to treat yourself as the baby. Sit with the baby. Speak positive words and compliments to the baby. And also gratitude. There are two aspects to us. I'm glad that I'm alive. That in itself, that sentence is in itself is expressing gratitude. You may not be saying, God, thank you for being alive, or thank the universe for being alive, but it's gratitude, and gratitude in itself is filled with love. And I cannot experience love unless I experience the self. I cannot experience love unless I experience the self, because the self is, I am love, therefore I am loved.
Thank you, Nina.
So I say meditation, meditation.
Yes, beautiful.
Join a group. If it's boring doing it on your own, join a group.
Definitely, and we have meditation classes.
Yes.
So yes, definitely join us. The next is not a question itself, but this person would like to share something.
Yes.
So if I can just read it out, Nina. Got out of a long depression and anxiety. But instead of any drugs, I ended up becoming a hoarder. No longer buy things, but need to feel okay to let them go, as feel they can all be used, not rubbish. Feel I need them. I had very similar process. They were a result of many losses, stress, and grief. I now think more with love too, and do understand pure consciousness as have been in this state too. Apart from detachment, how can I begin to let these things go?
Yes, yes, it's almost as if the person has moved from one state to the next, and that's a good thing in itself, because it feels like it's a progression. It is a progression. So I really kind of like that. However, if I'm hoarding, again, there's an identity issue. If I'm hoarding, if I'm hoarding, it means that there is something about myself which I believe is not complete. Which I believe is not complete. And I would suggest to that person to just basically churn on it. Churn on it, hold it and work with it over a period of time and see what comes up.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
This next question is something that I think many of us have a challenge with, especially when we're living with other people, or we have friends and work colleagues that we actually see them going through something. The question is, how can we persuade someone to accept that they are depressed and need help from a doctor?
Yes, unfortunately, persuading someone doesn't actually work. And I suppose the concern might be, well, if they are in that state of mind, will they ever, come to the realization that they are anxious and they are depressed? But trying to change them or trying to get them to believe, to understand that there's something wrong doesn't work. It's about really doing the best you can to help that person, realizing the boundaries that you must take for yourself in order for self-care to exist. Yes. And doing whatever it is that is practical to get the doctors to intervene. But trying to persuade feels like it could get a bit difficult, intense, and cause a lot of anxiety, even more anxiety.
Another question. I know, Monica, you're putting your hand up, but I have quite a list here. So I will come back to you. Another question, Nina, is I am sensitive to the feelings, to others' feelings, meaning empathic, and can be overwhelmed when close to others. How can I overcome this?
Again, it's working on getting to know the self. And really, when you get to know the self, when you become friends with yourself, automatically a certain level of detachment develops within you where it's okay to pull back and not open yourself up to, an environment where you're going to feel exposed or being bombarded with other people's thoughts and feelings. Because at the end of the day, if I am not strong in my spiritual development enough, I won't have the intuition to enable me to deal with the circumstances in a way that's appropriate and to protect myself and care for the people I'm with. So intuition, there are lots of us who are empaths who I would say are not necessarily spiritually developed in order to know how to use, for example, the 8 powers, the 8 spiritual powers to deal with the situation, right? We dive in, we get hurt because we want to help naturally, but it doesn't mean that is the best way forward. It doesn't mean it helps everyone involved. So it's about making sure that the intellect is really working to the extent based on the amount of work, meditation that I put into it, and that I know that what I'm going to do is the right thing. Empaths, keep yourself protected, I would say.
Beautiful, thank you. Thank you for that. Time is running short and I still have quite a few questions.
Okay, it's fine.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
The next question is, I feel panic when I hear noises that relate to PTSD. No help has been available.
BTSD.
PTSD.
Okay, yes. It's a panic disorder. Yes. Yes. No help
Has been available.
Even if she goes to her GP or they go to their GP, because normally the GP would help. Normally the GP would help, and it could be a question of actually having some talking therapy. But again, that's not what I would necessarily recommend coming from my angle. It's about really, there are some issues there, and it's about learning about meditation and being really committed and disciplined in sitting with yourself and not being impatient, because there are no quick fixes. There are just no quick fixes at all. Being patient to work with yourself. And to be quite frank, most of the problem is not having the patience and not having the discipline and the commitment to work with the self.
Mm-hmm. Here's another question, Nina.
Yes.
To try and stop worrying, nail-biting obsession, fear of driving, can't concentrate like I did, get anxiety when overthinking, getting exhausted, looking after elderly parents, and partner with depression. Do I lack positive mental power? Any ideas welcomed?
Yep. Okay, I would suggest that you carve out a little time for yourself where it's your time. You have mentioned quite a lot there. And as I said at the beginning of the lecture, start small and build. There are a number of things in your orbit at the moment that really stops you from practical things, which stop you from doing that. But really try and carve out, a slot during the day, during a 24-hour day, apart from when you're sleeping. And, go to the park, join a group, where you're out of that environment and you begin to work on yourself, look after yourself. That's the way to start, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you. This is, I will read it out. Another question. I'm finding hypervigilance from PTSD a barrier to the regular meditation practice I know I need. My mind perceives switching off acute awareness of my surroundings as too dangerous and leads me away whenever I intend to turn my awareness more inwards and be in a calmer state. Do you have any advice for working around this, please? Do you have any advice working around this, please?
Yes, it's about, oh my gosh. So it's about, I don't know whether or not you have been trying a number of different types of meditation. And if you have been trying a number of different types of meditation, perhaps what you need to do is really just work with one. Stick with it and see how it goes. Because it does worry me that perhaps, you know, you're in too many different places, too many schools of thoughts at the same time, and you need to just focus on just one thing. Because your mind is else, it has a number of different ideas in it that you're not sure about, and you're not even sure about what you're doing. It really stops you from focusing on concentrating. Yeah, that's my feeling.
Right.
I hope I understood it properly.
I'm sure that everybody has found this session very, very helpful.
Yeah.
As we said, that it's just such a sort of mind-boggling subject.
It is.
It's not easy just to sort of say, oh, I have depression, and just get an answer for it, because there is no one answer. So we're going to end today's session with just a few announcements. Number one is that if you all would like today's session, it has been recorded, and we will send it out to you. If you send us your email to bradford@innerspace.org, O-R-G, bradford@innerspace.org. And we will send the recorded today's session, and the handouts that Nina has said. Also, our telephone number is 012-74-309-404. Also, you could, as soon as in about 2 days' time, Nina's talk will be going on to our YouTube. When I say our YouTube link, I mean that Bradford at Inner Space, we have our own YouTube attached to the website. It will go on there. Or if you go onto YouTube and just type in Bradford Inner Space, you will go there. Okay, and our website, please go on to our website regularly, bradford.innerspace.org, O-R-G. Okay, so thank you all very much. And yes, our sessions that are on for this week, we have our creative meditation class, which is every Tuesday evening from 6 to 7:30, and the Zoom ID is 814-097-6317. No password is required, the same Zoom ID that you came on to today. But do join us, it's a very beautiful class. And then we have another one every Thursday, Virtues and Powers, which we all, as Nina said, we all use them in our day-to-day life, and we need to in order to see ourselves properly. And that is also from 6 to 7:30, and the same Zoom ID. Okay, and next Saturday, we have Mark Fleming joining us, and his session will be on Write Your Own Destiny. That will be Saturday, 29th of August at 5 o'clock till 6:30, and the Zoom ID is also the same, 814-097-6317, no password required. So I hope everybody has enjoyed today. There are a lot of new names that I don't recognize. So please join us every Saturday at 5 o'clock for the meditation class on Tuesday and the Virtues and Powers class on a Thursday, which these three things are regular. A very, very big thank you to Nina. Thank you for joining us, Nina, for so many insights into depression and anxiety. Thank you. Okay, everyone, take care, look after yourself, and keep safe. Nina, would you like to do a meditation?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Do you have some music in the background?
Yeah, background, usually when we have music.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No problem.
There's a breakup.
Yes, no problem. So, okay. Sitting comfortably, I focus my attention on my breath, taking 4 deep breaths, allowing the breath to reach in the bottom of the diaphragm and up again. The breath is the bridge that takes me inwards. Where I can become the detached observer of the mind, of the inner thoughts and feelings, the compulsive behaviors. Your inner world is your safest place. It's where you empower yourself, where the light shines through the darkness, and profound insights and realizations about the self are available. Who am I? How do I face fear with love and detachment? We live in a world of opposites, of good, of bad, right and wrong, ups and downs, black and white, fear, feeling safe, silence, noise, love, hate, detachment, attachment. These signposts of opposites, of duality, provides us with the freedom to choose what's best for our soul's purpose and the whole world. In the awareness of my eternal self. I understand that freedom is a state of mind, and through I, the soul, and through choice, I can bring about a sense of freedom in my life. Freedom lies within the choices I make. In this context of opposites, of duality, which side of the coin do I choose? I choose to be free, or I can choose to be in bondage. Either way, freedom or bondage is simply just a thought away. As I experience the outcomes of my actions, I choose to see and understand the effects of the signposts I love, of love versus a hate, fear versus feeling safe, silence versus noise, attachment versus detachment. Fear and attachment are the same side of the coin. When I'm fearful, I'm attached to the absence of what I want to happen. My attention is focused on the outer. I become anxious. My energy is being drained. In this way, I've lost my self-respect. There is emotional pain, confusion, and it means I am out of alignment with my true self. Detachment and love, on the other hand, are the other side of the coin, where I'm feeling safe, I'm feeling calm, confident, peaceful, loving, And there is this compelling feeling that all my needs are met. Why my attention is focused inwards. My energy is being charged. I'm in alignment with my true self. In this awareness, I understand that courage is a love affair with love. And the unknown. And with detachment, I move into a familiar place with courage. It becomes a dance of love. When faced with a challenge, all I need to do is to switch perspective from the outer to the inner. The source of my wellspring of empowerment and love. I understand the role of fear in my life and in the world. It signposts me to freedom. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. For those of you who are new today, Om Shanti means I am a being of peace. So with that, we'll say bye today. Once again, Nina, thank you. And thank you to all of you who've joined us today. See you all next week.